Hey everyone, today we are not actually keeping the surprise because Ben is already on the stage, but I will introduce him anyway. So today we have a very special guest, Ben Leonard. He's the ultimate entrepreneur, and I'm sure that most of our Amazon sellers have heard of him. But if you haven't, he has exited his fitness brand to about a few years ago, and he achieved 6 million per year in sales just in the UK and Europe. He has been featured in Forbes. He has spoke to Stephen Bartlett on the CEO, the Diary of a CEO podcast, and he is an awesome published author. I actually have his book right here. So there you go.
Wow.
A general fangirl. So welcome, Ben. Nice to have you here.
Hey, good to be here. Great introduction. Small correction.
Okay.
I haven't been on the Diary of a CEO podcast.
Mm.
I have spoken on stage with Stephen Bartlett, but I haven't quite made it onto his podcast. But Stephen, if you're listening,
Yeah,
I would be
I'm
very
sure
happy to
I'm sure he's a listener. So hopefully this is a good way to get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ben, I would really love to actually start with a little bit of an intro about how basically did you start your e-commerce journey. I mean, I know because I read your book, but it's actually a really interesting story. So, how about you run us through it?
Sure. Yeah. It was a bit of an accident to begin with. So for a bit of context, I'm from Aberdeen in northeast Scotland. Aberdeen is an oil town. It's the main place in the UK and in fact Europe for the oil industry. My passion is environmental conservation, so I ended up working in that industry, helping oil companies to get greener. And then one day in early 2016, I got very ill with a heart condition. I had to stop work and sadly stop all my fitness hobbies for a while I recovered. I'm fine now. And so I decided to finally take action on an idea that I'd had for about 4 years to start a strength and conditioning brand. I had the idea in 2012 and I did nothing about it because I believed that entrepreneurs were other people. You know, they were people with business degrees or inventors or people who'd inherited a family business. And it wasn't until I thought, actually, you know what, I can start developing these products really as just a hobby, something to help me earn some extra pocket money while I recovered. And it turned out I was quite good at it. And eventually I took that full time.
Amazing. It really is such an interesting journey, that kind of switch from, the full employment to kind of entrepreneurship, and it is a scary one. Was there a point that you kind of made that jump full time? Like what triggered it for you to kind of, just leave a paying salary behind?
Yeah, I made the jump too late. So, in entrepreneurship, it's as entrepreneurs, we take risks, right? And I think as entrepreneurship has become more of more sexy, I think in large parts thanks to social media, this idea of taking risks and putting everything on the line has been perhaps over celebrated. I was quite risk averse when I started in entrepreneurship. I take more risks now, but only because I've become more used to it. But when I was first, running the business, I still had my day job, and I didn't quit my day job until 1 year before I sold the business. And at that point, we were turning over, probably $3 million.
Wow.
Maybe more like 4. It wasn't until then that I took the leap. And at that point, I had no idea that I would sell the business. I still thought that I would probably continue to grow it. But finally, I reached a point where it was silly for me to keep working. Like it was holding the business back significantly, me to be putting hours into earning money for, shadowy shareholders who I would never meet, and earning money for the man instead of earning money for my business.
And so what kind of prompted you then to sell the brand when you sold it? Like what was the kind of the decision of, okay, now it's time for me to exit this? Because sometimes people run a brand for a long, long time and it's kind of their baby, which it is, and it's sometimes difficult to let go.
Yeah. So I think to understand the context of this, you have to understand that the e-commerce environment was quite different. So I made the decision in early February 2019. The deal was not done until Halloween 2019, so the end of October. And I made the decision because I had heard whispers through the grapevine that e-commerce businesses were becoming more attractive to investors, and they were becoming a legitimate acquisition target. Before this, if you tried to get money from the bank to go buy an e-commerce business, they wouldn't give it to you. They'd look at you like you had two heads, because they didn't believe that e-commerce businesses were legit businesses, because they didn't have a roof or windows or a door. And I had a friend who'd actually sold two small e-commerce businesses through one of the infamous flipping websites that exist. And I sort of looked at my numbers, did some back of an envelope calculations, and realized that I was sitting on a pretty valuable asset. At the time, my wife was pregnant with our first child. We wanted to move house. And I was at a point in the business where I could either hire a team and scale or sell. And to me, the idea of holding onto the business and growing it even more was attractive. But at the time of at that time in the e-commerce world, there was a lot of uncertainty. Like, I had no idea if this new bubble that for buying e-commerce businesses that was emerging was going to last. And I didn't know what was around the corner for my business. Most of my sales were through Amazon, so I was beholden to one platform. I had quite a lot of risk tied up in that business, and here was an opportunity to take chips off the table at a pretty young age and basically give my family a safety net for the rest of our lives. So that's what drove that decision in early 2019 to start to pursue an exit.
And I think it's I don't know specifics, but I imagine it was a fantastic decision given how kind of the trends ended up happening. And that was in 2019. So you had a bit of COVID maybe, which could have been a good thing ahead, but then also you had kind of this whole depression of exit.
Yeah. It's interesting. I sold probably 6 months too early for two reasons. One was 6 months later, multiples were insane.
Yeah.
And two, the sales of my business went insane because of COVID. So although a significant amount of the training equipment we were producing was for use in the gym, a lot of it could be used at home. And a lot of people were now starting to put together their own home gyms. And so had I had the trailing 12 months profit that I would have had 6 months later and applied a significantly higher multiple, I probably would have got more than double for the business. Having said that, if I then at that point thought, oh, well, this is going great, I'm going to hold on to it, and tried to sell it another 6 months after that, I might not have been able to sell it because everything went to kind of a hell in a handbasket because of all sorts of things to do with supply chain and ultimately to do with COVID and the economic conditions at the time.
I mean,
go on.
Just to follow up on that, I've just been on a 3-day course of Yuri Levine, who is a co-founder of Uber. So I've got all of his kind of like learnings fresh in my mind. But he says there's no such thing as a wrong decision. There's only the decisions you make. And then, like, if you don't like the outcome, you make another decision. You start another business or whatever. So it's like, you can't change anything. It obviously has worked out well for you. So it's
Yeah, you can't live your life thinking, oh, I should have sold it 6 months later, because who knows? I might have got hit by a bus. I made the decision I made. It was the right decision at the time, given all the information that I had available to me, and that's okay.
Okay, well, if you were a seller right now, would you sell again to an aggregator?
Very interesting question, and I have an interesting perspective on this because I co-own e-com brokers. So we help people plan and execute their exits. So I get to see inside of this every day. Many of the quote-unquote aggregators who still exist now, who have survived, they actually hate it if they're called aggregators now. They prefer it to be called something else, like perhaps a digital brand house. They've matured. Many of them have got their act together and started to actually understand how to properly operate these businesses and treat them like real brands rather than just trading cash flow. That said, there's still some out there that are pretty poor that have somehow scraped by. And there are other new aggregators who have adopted a different mindset than the original wave of aggregators. Like, the original wave of aggregators was financial guys raising money to acquire cash flow at a low multiple and ultimately either sell it on or go public. What's happening now is you've got e-commerce guys raising money to roll up these businesses because they actually understand e-commerce and how to operate and market these businesses. So the brands that we sell now, first of all, they're brands. Gone are the days where you could just sell a business selling a mishmash of stuff online. Secondly, there's only decent operators left to buy them, generally speaking. So would I sell a business now? Absolutely. If it's a big enough business with solid profits, solid year-over-year growth history, and plenty of growth baked in for a new owner, then the new owner can get a great deal, and I can also get a great deal. I think it's worth bearing in mind, though, that you want to be building a legit brand that isn't just going to be attractive to a quote unquote aggregator, but potentially a strategic buyer as well. Now, that is harder to come by until you're doing sort of at least $1 million in EBITDA, or more, preferably. But as long as you operate your business like a real brand, like your own favorite brands, then you've got a good chance of securing a great exit.
Well, something you mentioned in there, which was businesses are buying brands now; they're not buying kind of mishmash of sellers. Leads us on to our next question, which is really about your book, Quit Stalling and Build Your Brand. So, I guess we only have an hour of your time. Obviously, we'd encourage the listeners to read the book if you like the short clips that we can get from you here. But maybe if it's okay, it'd be great to kind of go. Well, maybe we can start with the question, like, why did you decide to write this book?
Sure. I've been toying with the idea for a while. I felt like I had a book in me. I'd read a lot of books, and I'd felt like there was a gap for an e-commerce brand building playbook. There were other books out there that were quite specific to a particular platform, like Amazon, say, but those go out of date in sort of 6 months or so. And there were other books out there that I had a lot of respect for, but were fairly vague. And I put the idea on hold. And then in spring of 2022, I was at a conference, and there was a guy on stage, and he had the audience eating out of the palm of his hand. And everyone else was sort of, eyes locked in on this guy. And I kind of metaphorically took a step back and looked around the room at everyone else, and they were mesmerized. He was casting a spell over them with the, frankly, mediocre content that was coming out of his mouth. It was, most of it was generally true, but a lot of it was pretty average. And I'd been doing that kind of stuff for years. And I thought, well, now I need to come out of stealth mode. And so that's when I decided to write the book. And that's when I really started to put myself out there, on social, etc., as someone who knows what they're talking about when it comes to consumer product brand building and e-commerce.
And so, okay, we are like, let's say you are a seller right now, you have a product on Amazon, but you don't have a brand. Like, what would you do if you were them?
Yeah, first thing I would do is take a step back and ask myself, how does my product, or if it my attempt at a brand, how is that going to be perceived to everyone else? And say, well, what do my favorite brands do? That could be to do with my hobbies, could be to do with my profession, could be to do with the food products in my cupboard. But how do they look and feel and behave? Acting in that way is not reserved for big guns like Nike. Anyone can do that. The moment that you decide you've got a brand, provided it behaves like one. So start doing that. And that means understanding who your audience is, understanding the problems that they have, developing products that solve those problems and actually provide value to their lives as it relates to your industry or niche. Understanding how they want to be marketed to, and then show up there. So if your audience is, knitting enthusiasts on Pinterest, then go there, right? Or whatever it might be, and provide helpful, compelling, engaging, useful content that makes them know, like, and trust you. And when it comes to Amazon specifically, as you mentioned, of course, having a wonderful listing, great images, great copy, and dialed in PPC campaigns, that everyone seems to talk about this. I'm like, well, yeah, that's like a given. That's standard. That's table stakes to have an Amazon account. But it's everything that happens after that. Like, the relationship with the customer doesn't end when they click buy now. You should be delivering a quality product, not just some crap that you put a logo on, that actually solves the problem, and then give them an experience, whether that's the packaging or the product or incentivizing them to come to your website or your social, providing them with great value there, and getting them on your email list and providing them with value there, and so on and so on and so forth. I think there's a danger that I have this phrase that people end up owning a business and it turns into a genetically modified fish hamster hybrid, because on the one hand they're stuck on this hamster wheel of just constantly chasing sales on Amazon, with no sort of follow-up and nothing afterwards to build a relationship with the customer. And on the other hand, they're also stuck in the Amazon goldfish bowl, and they're not doing anything outside of Amazon in terms of whether that's quality content on YouTube, an awesome social media channel, say on Instagram, fantastic email marketing, or any other sort of marketing campaigns. So it's a very long way of saying behave like your own favorite brands behave.
So you touched on it on that in that answer a little bit, but maybe we can go into a bit more details. So a key part of this is kind of knowing your audience. So how do you go about finding, who you're selling to?
Yeah. So the first answer is not going to please some people, because there'll be some people listening or watching who have a business selling products, but they don't care about those products. And my preferred approach is that the founder develops a brand around something that they themselves are passionate about, because that is an incredibly easy way to know your audience. So, for instance, both of you are actually passionate about AI. Therefore, you know what your audience is looking for, and it's relatively straightforward for you guys to understand how to develop services, solutions, products for your audience, and also how to market to your audience by delivering value to them, other than your product. Same goes for a physical consumer product brand. So for me, I'm passionate about strength and conditioning. My first brand was a strength and conditioning brand, which developed quality products at a fair price, and some quite unique products, even one in particular that had a patent on it. And I had a huge legal dispute. It was very fun. I won. But if you're listening and you say, well, that's all well and good, Ben, but I already have a business selling, baking products, and I have no interest in baking. Well, attempt to get someone into your organization who is passionate about baking. That could be partnering with a creator or an influencer. And B, go and do the work to understand your market, do the market research, do surveys, pay for industry data that you can get your hands on. Become religious about consuming content about baking on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Dig into negative and mediocre reviews of competitor products. Read the magazines and the blogs by people in that space so you can understand what's going on, have your finger on the pulse, and spot the trends and jump on those trends and develop products for it. I think that's really where it begins. It's products that really serve niches that people are passionate about.
Yeah, and to be honest, with my experience working with clients, I think because we are talking about AI and e-commerce podcast after all, I have found that actually using AI can help a lot with understanding customers and understanding existing customers by analyzing a lot of data. But have you used, like right now in 2024, AI in terms of any of the points sort of that you mentioned in terms of understanding customer and brand building?
Oh yeah, all the time. For example, it's especially with the latest iteration of ChatGPT is frankly incredible, and it's frightening to think what it'll be like in 6 months' time. But for instance, I could quite simply go and scrape a load of, we were talking about baking a moment ago, right? And it came to me because I was talking to a client yesterday who has a brand of baking products. I could go scrape tons of blogs about baking and transcripts of YouTube videos about baking and transcripts of podcast episodes about baking, chuck it into ChatGPT and ask it to give me all sorts of wonderful things like customer avatars and pinpoint particular problems and pain points that amateur bakers are having, and therefore on the back of that help me come up with product ideas. The possibilities are endless. And then more specifically, just ideas on how I have used AI in my business lately, not necessarily on the branding, but I wanted to send a message to someone in China a couple of days ago, And I didn't just want to use Google Translate. I wanted to really make sure that the message really hit home, and that I avoided any sort of cultural faux pas, particularly when it comes to doing business with China. So I asked I asked ChatGPT to make sure that my translation did that, and that it was paid critical attention to cultural sensitivity in the way of doing business in China. And then it gave me the answer in Chinese. And then I fed that back through Google Translate to double check that it was what I wanted, and it was. So that's just one example. A couple of days ago, I used it to help me in a negotiation on payment terms. I use it every day.
Yeah, so fascinating. And I guess just to take it back to the the structure of your book, you're looking to start a business. You have an area you're passionate in. Maybe it's cooking, as you say. You understand the audience. You're reading the blogs. You're on the newsletters, so you understand the trends and everything. How do you then go about developing the first product?
Sure. I mean, there's a ton of different ways to do this, and it depends on your budget, of course, as well. Because if you're going to create something new that requires custom molding, perhaps even custom tooling, that potentially is going to cost tens of thousands of dollars to develop those molds and those tools. So depends on budget. I'll give you a specific example because it's quite fun, and it's how I developed my first product. So my first product was a jump rope or a skipping rope for my brand Beast Gear, and it was called the Beast Rope. But I didn't have the budget for anything custom, but I did know what was wrong with the skipping ropes that I already used in my training. Again, comes back to understanding my niche because I was passionate about it myself. And after I'd found a bunch of manufacturers and whittled them down to sort of 4 or 5, and then whittled them down to the final 2, I went to one in particular and I said, send me all of your off-the-shelf jump ropes. And they did. And I tested them, and some athletes I'm friends with tested them. And I went back and I said, okay, I like this bit from that one and that bit from that one. I don't like the way it does this. And can we make that bit a bit longer and that bit a bit shorter? And what if we did that? And they would send back, 3 or 4 different versions, and I would test those, and we'd go through the same process again. And we were basically iterating on off-the-shelf components, but putting them together in different combinations and stretching whatever they could do without custom molding. And that meant that I ended up with a really high quality product that was unique to me, that solved the problems I wanted to solve and was an improvement on what was already on the market, but I hadn't spent a ton of money developing it. I call that the Frankenstein's monster approach, or Franken product approach. And then I got the manufacturer to sign an exclusivity agreement that product was my product alone. And so after the brand became successful, people would try to rip off my product with copies of the Beast Rope, but none of them could actually get close to the real quality. It looked the same, but they couldn't match the components on the inside.
But do you think this is actually possible to do nowadays? There's so many products on Amazon, and obviously when you started, that was obviously Amazon was fairly, I guess, new platform for a lot of sellers, and so maybe it was easier at that point. But do you think in 2024 you can still adopt the same approach?
I do, but I also think that it's not necessarily. I love Amazon as a sales channel, but I don't think Amazon is even necessarily the sales channel you particularly would want to launch on first, or at least if you were going to launch a new brand, you might not necessarily want to launch it on Amazon alone. So, for example, I'm launching a new baby brand early next year now, and we will launch D2C, our own website, before Amazon, because Amazon is such a competitive and expensive sandpit to play in now. We believe it makes more sense with a quality product, which we have, and a compelling offer that we have, and great creative that we will make, to launch that on our own website first, and obviously pay for the ads to drive the sales on there before, and generate that brand interest before we move into Amazon.
Can I just ask a follow-up question though? Because this is I completely subscribe to that. But if you see Nike came, last week announced that they're going back to Amazon, and so it just seems like Amazon is a must platform. And for a lot of the listeners that we have, Amazon sometimes accounts for, let's say, 90% of their revenue. And so really the question is, of course, D2C in theory sounds great, you own the customer and so forth, but in practice it's a very expensive exercise. And so the question is it possible for every seller to launch through this route, or is Amazon after all maybe a more cost-effective way to launch, at least for sort of new smaller sellers?
Great question. I completely agree that Amazon is an absolute must. Like, I'm not saying don't go on Amazon. I think anyone who doesn't go on Amazon is bananas. But it's about priorities and the order in which you do things. For some people, I agree. They probably should start on Amazon. It depends on availability of cash, because, and also the niche they're in and how competitive it is. If they're going to enter a very competitive, difficult niche, then it's going to be really expensive to launch on Amazon. That said, from a cash point of view, it still might be a bit easier than having to kind of upfront pay for your ads, say on Meta, to drive traffic to your Shopify site. And the conversion rates on Amazon typically are going to be pretty damn high because people trust Amazon, people have got Prime accounts, their credit cards loaded in there, they just need to click buy now. I think that is a very complex question, and the answer depends on what you're selling, how competitive that niche is, what your budget is, what your average order value is going to be, and ultimately what your conversion rate is going to be, as it relates to your competition as well. It's a tricky one.
So we've mentioned cash a few times here. It's kind of obvious to do this nowadays. Well, I'll ask you, how much do you think you need nowadays to get started? And how do you advise people to go about having that cash if they don't, if they're not lucky enough to have that from a prior career or whatever, a relative or something like this?
Yeah. So let's stick with, actually, I think my answer actually is pretty decent for e-commerce generally. Mm-hmm. Let's assume that your product doesn't require tons of molding or anything like that, or lots of custom design. Like, for example, the product that I'm about to launch in the new year, I've spent something like £100,000 on the design. So that's kind of a different kettle of fish. But so assuming that that's not the case, I would say that a decent rule of thumb, and again, it's just a rule of thumb, but a decent rule of thumb and reasonably conservative is to have 120% of the average monthly sales that you're going to expect to get. So if you're going to use Amazon, at least as something to help you understand if there's demand here, and you're going to use a tool like, say, Jungle Scout or Helium 10, others are available, you would want to be looking for the median monthly revenue of the top, say, 10 to 15 organic listings to be generating, let's say, 10 grand, if your budget is going to be, say, 12 grand, for instance, right? That's generally how I see it coming out in the wash. But, there's so many factors in there. If everybody else has got, you want to find a niche in which there is a spread of prices. So there's low-priced items and high-priced items, so that you can kind of aim to land in the middle and get an ROI of at least 70, preferably over 100%. And where there's enough listings with, say, only 4 stars and below, that you can get in there with a superior product, and that's really important, and also a superiorly positioned product. Get reviews out of the gate, and people will, even though the competitors might have hundreds of reviews and you've got 24, people will click through and buy your product because your average rating is higher.
Okay, I feel like we need to write this down. It's a quite a formula. So, all right, but I guess I want to actually go back to the pre-launch, because what I find really interesting is, you talked about your strategy, which is now launching firstly on D2C. You talked about owning your audience and maybe, launching through newsletter, email. So if you are an e-commerce seller right now, what should be the must channels to include in pre-launch to essentially have a successful launch?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, to double down on what I said earlier, obviously understand your market. understand your target audience, understand your competition, understand industry trends and what's happening in your space, and then do whatever you can to validate your ideas. So that could be as simple as testing samples and prototypes with your target audience. So let's say it's baking, and once a week you meet with a group of bakers in your baking club, and you all share recipes and ideas and stuff. You might give them samples of your special new baking tin or whatever it might be. For me, it was testing products at my local CrossFit gym and boxing gym. And I went to both, and I also knew the professional athletes that were based there too, so that helped as well. But you could also use online surveys, for instance. So understand your market, validate the idea. That's the beginnings of it, and from there, you understand your market. Now you want to develop a brand that reflects your market, reflects your customer, who they aspire to be. Then you want to make sure that your product is genuinely solving the problems of your market. And the next stage, of course, will be to start generating a buzz online through your marketing. And we can dig into that if you want.
I would love that.
Yeah, sure. So my approach again, I know a lot of people listening, their main sales channel is going to be Amazon, and maybe upwards of 90% of their sales is going to be coming through Amazon. But that doesn't matter. You still want to be marketing off of Amazon to, first of all, add a sense of legitimacy to your brand, because people are going to be Googling you. But you also want to be behaving in a way that your competitors are not. It's the compounding effect of acting like a real brand that's going to eventually make the difference as to why your business is going to generate much, much bigger revenues and profits than your competitors. So Gary Vaynerchuk, some people love him, some people hate him. I love him. He talks about jab, 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 right hook, which stands for give, 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 ask. So your marketing should be giving value, giving value, giving value, and occasionally asking for the sale. So what do you give? You give helpful, compelling, engaging, useful content that makes the customer know, like, and trust you, and believe that you and your brand are an authority on the topic on which you're talking about, say baking, and then they'll want to buy from you. And you want to give them that content wherever they are, whether that's YouTube or Instagram or an email newsletter or sponsoring a podcast or building your own podcast or whatever it might be. So let me give you an example. Right now, I'm looking at you in a teleprompter, and that teleprompter is made by a brand called Elgato. And Elgato, I just dropped something. Elgato also make this. This is the box for a Stream Deck.
Mm-hmm.
And they also make the light that I just dropped and the other light over there. And so they are a brand of equipment for creatives or people that are going to record content of any kind. And I don't have to have a teleprompter by Elgato. I could have bought a generic one. And I don't have to have lights by Elgato. I could have bought generic ones. But since I already had the Stream Deck, and since I know, like, and trust them because I consume great content that I put out there that I enjoy, buy them, and I believe that they're an authority, and I know that they offer great service if anything goes wrong, I wanted to buy from them. So if you have a business now that's just selling generic, or rather, you might sell all the same stuff. You might have a great suite of fishing products, but you're offering nothing other than a bunch of listings on Amazon or a pretty generic Shopify site. Why would anyone care about your brand? Why would anyone even be fiercely defensive of your brand or become an evangelical fan of your brand? With my first brand, I would have customers queuing up to buy our new products, waiting for us to launch them when they could have bought one from our competitor because they had to have everything the same by my brand. And that's the power of marketing in a way that gives value rather than just saying, hey, buy my stuff. Because just saying, hey, buy my stuff is frankly pretty obnoxious.
Yeah. And you managed to achieve what I think is every marketer and brand owner and business owner's dream, which was, and I might be misquoting you from a different podcast, but I believe you had the Liverpool team members using your products just organically. And that wasn't some kind of video, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to explain it better than me?
Yeah, sure.
And then I forget
how I found out, but
how you managed this.
Yeah, so I mean, this happened multiple times. Mm-hmm. So, for example, an A-list Hollywood actor, I can't name who. It would be a mission impossible to tell you who. has a gym full of my first
Very
brand
funny.
stuff. That was organic, right? But I happen to know that that is true. With Liverpool, what happened was Virgil van Dijk, defender, had been injured for a long time. He came back from injury, and there was a photo shoot done with him in Liverpool's gym inside their training complex, and he was pictured with one of my products. It was a pad for making barbell hip thrusts more comfortable. Another example, Joe Hart, former England goalkeeper, used to post photographs of his home gym all over Instagram. My products were in there. Again, he wasn't a sponsored athlete, but as the brand grew, we gained a reputation. And this was all because we were acting like a real brand rather than just selling kind of random stuff. And he didn't buy it off Amazon. He bought it off of my website. I know because I searched through the orders. And then the best example was an MMA fighter. He's in the UFC. His name is Michael Venom Page. He bought one of our mouth guards. And at the time he was in the Bellator MMA. And before the fight, as you know, the cameras are in the ring, the fighters are getting ready. He goes up to the camera and kind of like grimaces or smiles aggressively at the camera with his mouth open, revealing beast gear across his teeth. And that was when I knew this brand meant something to people.
Yeah, it's incredible. And like that is the absolute holy grail, right? How did you achieve that?
The compounding effect of showing up every day to act like a real brand. And also a big one is do stuff that doesn't scale and then force it to scale. So let me give you an example. People who've heard me before will be bored of me saying this, but it doesn't matter. It's so important. An example. I would have people, and this still happens with the new brands, but with the first brand especially, people would post our products on Instagram, them using our products or whatever. We wouldn't just like the post. We would click on their profile, browse it for 30 seconds to a minute to learn something about them. Great, this is Dave from Cardiff. Wonderful. And we'd noticed that 2 weeks ago, he posted himself lifting a deadlift personal best. And today he's posted his new weightlifting belt from us. So we'd like the post. Yes, we'd put a really good comment on it, not some generic rubbish, but something actually about his post. But then we'd DM him. And we'd pay him personal attention, thanking him for posting about us, mentioning that our favorite city in the UK is Cardiff and we were there last year and had a great time. But also, congratulations on the deadlift PB you posted 2 weeks ago. He's going to know we've taken the time to learn about him. He's going to be blown away. People post on social for attention, usually from their friends and family. But when they're getting attention from the brand that they've just tagged, and it's that level of real attention, they're blown away. And then he'll do anything we want. So he'll go and leave us a review, whether that's on Trustpilot or Amazon or Walmart or whatever it might be. We can give him a discount code to go buy something else off the website, and he's going to do it because he feels special and he's now in a good mood. And then also what I would do is if it was Instagram, for example, I would save the post that he posted about us in a collection. So I would save it as, say, Weightlifting Belts UK, because Dave was in the UK. And 3 months later, I'm going to launch a new product in the UK to weightlifting fans. I go to that collection, I click on Dave's post, I click his username, I go back to the DMs, and I pick up the conversation. Hey, Dave, how you doing? Been a while since we caught up. How's your training? By the way, we're launching these new weightlifting straps. Would you like to get them for half price? And of course he would, and he loves us already. And so I just give him the keywords and let him go find it. We get a launch that sticks, we get a review that sticks, and it's a cheap launch that works. All because we went the extra mile to pay personal attention to this guy, who's now going to tell everyone in his gym about it. And I know there are people listening, screaming right now, that doesn't scale. It does. On the face of it, it doesn't. You think, how on earth can you make that scale? It's very simple. You create SOPs, you create templates, and you hire A players who aren't stupid and have, some brain cells between their ears to go and customize these and actually, make it work for real themselves. And you simply scale it. And we were doing this no problem at all when we were doing it, turning over $6 million a year, and it would still have worked at $16 million a year. And that is how we did it, amongst other things, of course.
I want to play a little bit of devil's advocate because I personally absolutely believe in the power of brand, and I think this is exactly what you need to in order to launch successful brand and product on Amazon right now. But what you see as a general trend is platform like Temu, like Shine, and now with Amazon's sort of like new update on the sort of the cheap Chinese manufacturer section, it seems like a lot more of, I guess, the people's eyeballs are going to the most cost efficient products, and maybe brand is more reserved for D2C. Do you think that when it comes to marketplaces, brand is that important? Do you think that the customer in the end still would prefer brand over the cheaper ripoff that is sitting next to it?
I think it depends. I think there is a portion of the market, a portion of customers who would who are happy to just get the cheap stuff, even if that means lower quality. It means it's going to take a bit longer to come from China. But there's 7 billion people on the planet, and there's plenty enough for me to position my brand as being at the higher end. If it doesn't have to be totally luxury, but just people who value brand and value quality and value experience. Also, I think anyone who owns a brand right now and is thinking of making a huge shift towards things like Temu and Shein and Amazon's new Chinese model, you are running a serious risk and playing a dangerous game, because what these platforms are doing, what Temu is doing, for example, they're acquiring a ton of customers onto their platform at very low prices, but they're acquiring low quality customers. They're acquiring customers who just want a cheap deal. And I don't want those customers. I don't want to destroy my brand by lowering myself to that level. And I don't need to. And no, I think most people with a quality brand don't need to do that. I think Temu and Shein might die off with Amazon's new approach. But also, you got to remember, Amazon's new approach is only for shipping goods from China. Currently, I manufacture in Vietnam and Pakistan. I'm not even manufacturing in China. So, and there's plenty of other places to manufacture too. So, I'm not worried about those platforms.
But just a follow-up question. So this is all well and good, but if we actually think about the Amazon algorithm still, I guess, giving preferential ranking to cheaper products, do you think then it becomes a little more complicated?
Yeah, it's interesting. Great point. It depends what Amazon's going to do in the way that they integrate their new approach, bringing stuff directly in from China, with the traditional Amazon as we know it. Also, the algorithm is a weird and wonderful thing, and obviously price is important, and people, in fairness, are quite price sensitive at the moment given the economic conditions that we're facing. But price isn't everything. There's a ton of value in brand equity, in experience, clearly in the quality of the product. So it I'm going to say it again. It depends.
Yeah. No, I think just to chime in on this, Amazon is moving to a much more curated and personalized view. And I think 6 months, a year from now, Amazon has 20 years of data on all of us and our spending habits. Do we like the cheap stuff? How long do we search? How many pages do we click through? Are we going to try and find the cheapest? Are we trying to find the most expensive? How often do we purchase? All of this data, and they'll be showing different customers different products. So if they know that you are someone who is always browsing through 10 products and landing on the cheapest one, they're just going to show you the cheapest one because they know that's going to increase conversion. If you're someone like myself, when I was buying these headphones, I think I'd be more in your customer zone, Ben, right? Because I didn't want to buy a Bose. I didn't want to buy £200, whatever it was, but I didn't want to buy £10, £15 cheap from China. And I was trying to find the genuine brands in the middle of that, where it's okay, the quality is going to be good enough to use it every day, but it's not so like that. So I think Amazon is going to help you to find your customers, is my view in the future. And I think what you're talking about here about brand building is going to, and knowing the audience is going to be super important to benefit the most from these algorithm changes that we'll see with Cosmo and the rest of it.
Yep. No, great point. Yeah, it will be very interesting to see what happens in the next 6 to 12 months for sure. As Amazon continues to build out its AI capability and uses its vast data set to its advantage.
So I guess we've started at the beginning. We talked about the audience. We talked about the first product. We mentioned capital. We talked about kind of the pre-launch and the marketing. Anything else to mention in this journey before talking about exit?
I think you want to make sure that. Well, I think something I come across a lot is people in a hurry to make their business incredibly systemized and slick. And whilst I harp on about systemized, slick, neat and tidy businesses a lot when it comes to an exit, you got to remember that entrepreneurship and launching a business is chaotic. It's messy. When you start, you're going to be building the plane while you fly it, and that's absolutely fine, riding by the seat of your pants. Once things are taking over and you can afford to take a step back and drink a cup of tea and heave a big sigh of relief because you're kind of in orbit and the wheels aren't about to fall off, then you can start to think about those things. And that takes us nicely into scaling towards an exit, I think, because ultimately that's what most of us are in this for, is to build a business that one day we can sell for hopefully life-changing money.
And so how then, once you're at this stage, how would you prepare your business to be sort of as exitable as possible?
Yeah, great question. You want to remember that on the other end of selling your business is somebody buying your business, and you can only sell your business if somebody wants to buy it. So you have to put yourself in the buyer's shoes and understand what they want. And they want several things. They want a profitable business with strong enough margins, preferably 15, 20% or more, or ideally more like 30, which is difficult to come by now if we're talking about EBITDA margins in the e-commerce world. They want strong year-over-year growth, at least 20, 30%, and plenty of growth opportunity in the future. They don't want a fad. They don't want something highly regulated. They don't want something that's about to get banned. They want a strong and reliable supply chain. They want an intellectual property moat around the business, preferably involving at least design patents, if not utility patents. That would be even better. And they want to know that the business is a neat and tidy machine that they can pick up and drop into their existing setup. So provided you do all that, and that, I know that sounds overwhelming on the face of it, there's no reason you can't have a great business that you can sell. And frequently we'll have people come to us with a business which from the outside looks wonderful and on the inside is a mess. And that's okay, because we'll work with them for 18 months to get it where it needs to be and then sell it. So yeah, that's kind of our approach, is look at things from the buyer's perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess that was a fantastic whistle-stop tour of the book. Obviously, we'll link the book. So if you want more details, that's where to find it. I guess, Ben, before I ask, where people can find you and reach out, is there anything else you want to, that we didn't ask that you want to touch upon?
I don't know. I mean, there's so many things that we could talk about. I don't think so. I think just the encouragement I'd give to anyone is take action. If you're sitting on a business now that's doing quite nicely, but ultimately you have a gut feeling that no one would want to buy it, well, take action. Pivot into turning it into a real brand, and think about the things you can do to make it more attractive to a buyer. Come and have a chat with me. And if none of those things apply and you haven't even started yet, then get started, because building consumer product brands is great fun. At times incredibly stressful, but I love it. I'm glad I got sick and started an e-commerce brand, because I wouldn't want to be in any other space, I don't think.
Awesome. This has been a really interesting conversation. I love hearing about your path, and I think it's really inspirational for any future entrepreneurs, and I think for anyone who's in the e-commerce space right now.
Thanks. Yeah, no, really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So Ben, where should they reach out to you if they're interested, if they're thinking about selling their business or they want to start one?
Sure. I mean, look, I have multiple hats. So if you're looking for sort of consulting and advice, drop me an email, ben@benleonard.pro, or DM me on any social platform. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram at benleonardpro. I'm on Twitter. X. If you want to sell your business, even if that's not going to be for another couple of years, head over to ecombrokers.co.uk. We can help you there. And if you want to learn and do it yourself with kind of a done with you, sort of course approach, head over to product-empire.com. That's my brand building course. It's not an Amazon course, and it's not a 10 grand Amazon course at that. Yeah, would love to hear from anyone, because I'm a very approachable person.
Cool. Well, we'll link all of that. Hopefully, hopefully, people find that really useful. I know, having, spent a evening and dinner with you, I know you're full of even more good insights and kind of expertise than you can say kind of in this public space. But yeah, thank you so much for coming, Ben.
Appreciate it. Really love chatting with you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome.